Well, let's get underway. Well, tēnā koutou katoa, ka nui te mihi kia koutou ko Gregor Fountain tākongo ko Ngāti Pākehā Hau, ko Te Tiritia Waitangi Te Waka, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Let's open our session with karakia. Tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, kia tau ai te Māori ora, tūturu whakamaua kia teina, haumie, huie, taikie. Greetings again, everybody, and especially the people that have just joined us. It's such a privilege to have you all with us. The seminar you have signed up to today has a really big focus on the I Coach Kids global movement, and through connections that we've got through New Zealand and across the globe today, we're going to be hearing about the latest research focusing on youth sport and what coaches can do to stop dropout and engage, and what we can all do to engage new generations of coaches and participants. And we're also going to hear a little bit from some people based in New Zealand on some reflections of what this research means for us here. So we're delighted this morning to have with us Professor Sergio Lara Berthiel, who gave me a little lesson on how to pronounce his surname, and he's even given me the thumbs up. Thumbs up is very generous. And Dr. Gary Hodgson, a much easier name to say, I should say that Sergio is joining us from his mother-in-law's house in Madrid. And Gary is joining us from his own home in Leeds. So it's great to have you guys with us. And then closer to home, based at the University of Waikato, we have our great friend, Dr. Will Roberts, who is going to provide some information for us at the end. And although Dr. Kirsten Wing is not with us, we did want to leave her name up on the slide because she's such an important person in the work that Will is going to be presenting. And then finally, our Sport New Zealand colleague, Andy, will provide a little bit of an update from Sport New Zealand to finish us off. So thank you again for being here. We really encourage you to use the chat and to ask questions. But it would be really awesome, just as we start, if you could use the chat now, just to talk a little bit about why you're interested in this topic. Do you work in policy? Do you coach teams? Are you in the academic sector? What's your interest in this topic? Or maybe, like me, you're a parent of sporting kids and you're really interested in what can work well for them. But as you're doing that, I will pass over to Sergio Lara Berthiel, who is going to start. He's going to take control of the slides, and then he is going to open this presentation for us. And it looks from the opening slide that he'll be doing that alongside Gary, which is really great. So I will pass over to both of them now. Thanks, team.
Hi, everyone. And Gregor, thank you so much for that introduction and for the invitation to be with you tonight. It's an absolute honor and privilege to be with you. We are very aware of all the work that you are doing in New Zealand, and we are big fans of what you're doing there. I think we've learned more from you than you've learned from us, really. So that's great. But look, it's a great pleasure to be here with Gary to talk to you about the I Coach Kids global movement. For the people on the call, you may have noticed that I'm not from the UK. I'm from Madrid originally. I live in Manchester, but I'm currently in Madrid doing some data collection. But you can tell by the accent that I'm not from the UK. I'm kind of the equivalent of Bad Bunny in the physical education and sport world. So let me get going a little bit. What we're gonna do today, okay? We're gonna look at four things, really. We're going to tell you a little bit about I Coach Kids. Then we're going to tell you about some of the research that we've done in the youth sport landscape. Based on that research, we're going to offer you some ideas around how we can engage and inspire the next generation of participants and coaches. And then we're going to look at one of our, if you want, our flagship document, really, which is the iCoach Kids Pledge, which provides 10 golden principles to make sport enjoyable for children. Quickly about us, okay? I'm going to make a quick start. Like I was saying, I'm originally from Madrid. I'm a basketball coach that happens to work in academia. I like to say rather than the other way around. My identity is as a basketball coach of 30 years of coaching. Very lucky to have coached from international Great Britain senior national teams to community basketball with 5-year-olds. And then very fortunate to work and research at a university in the UK, Leeds Beckett University, where I've been able to spend a lot of time researching both youth sport, but then also researching high performance sport and coach education. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Gary quickly so Gary can introduce himself.
Yeah, I mean, in short, I am a Sergio tribute act, but with a less exotic accent. Little bit more pale, little bit more British. But yeah, my research is around youth sport and coach development, and I've been working with iCoach Kids now for the last 6 years, and more broadly at Leeds Beckett University for the last 10. But that is more than enough about me. I'm going to hand back over to Sergio to get our teeth into the good stuff.
Cheers, Gary. Okay, so a little bit about iCoach Kids. Okay, I think on the next slide, we should have a video that hopefully is going to play.
This is my time, this is my moment. You better bet that I'm on it. Ready and set, I'ma own it. Blast it to 10, then keep going. There ain't no coasting, I never settle, don't play. Putting the kettle to flame. I go 100 all day. Foot on the pedal, no brakes. 10, 9, paid all my dues, waited in line. 8, 7, now it's about time that I take mine. 6, 5, king of the jungle, heart of a lion. 4, 3, 2, 1, watch out, here I come. This is my time, I'm on the rise. Can't hold me down, I'm too fly. This is my time, ready to shine, brighter than all of the lights. Cause when it's game time, seconds away and the game's on the line. There ain't no doubt in my mind, beating the buzzer like cause when it's game time, seconds away and the game's on the line. There ain't no doubt in my mind, beating the buzzer like this is my time.
Okay, so there were already some Easter eggs in that video that hopefully you're going to pick out as we go through the presentation. But really, we wanted to make you aware of who we are and what we do, really. The movement was born in 2020, but iCoach Kids really was born in 2016 as a little project, a joint project between a few European countries, but then very quickly grew legs and got the attention of quite a few organizations, and very quickly became a movement that was being used in, everything we do was used in over 200 countries, as you saw there, by over 500,000 coaches, really. The mission of iCoach Kids is very simple. We want to promote sport policy, education, and practice that is going to put children first in sport. We then have a vision where we have a world where every child has access to positive sport experiences that are going to foster a love for sport, play, and physical activity throughout life. And we use 3 strategic pillars to try and bring this to reality. One is that we work directly to try and develop the people that deliver sport, really, because one of the biggest motivations to do iCoach Kids was we put so much responsibility on coaches, we expect so much of them, but then we give them very little support, especially those working in the grassroots. Okay, so we wanted to fill that space with resources and support for coaches. We wanted to work with international organizations to drive global change, and that's why, for example, we work with the Sport New Zealand. And then we try to do as much research as we can to evidence the impact of what we're trying to do or what we promote. That's just a bit of a flashy slide if you want to show you how successful the movement has been in connecting with some of the biggest players in the system. Some of these are founding partners of iCoach Kids. Some others have joined the movement over the years, and we're very proud to be working with so many important organizations that actually contribute to iCoach Kids, not only take out from iCoach Kids, but they also contribute a lot to what we do. Overall, we have a number of resources. So we have a really nice website. Just really earlier this week, we launched the new version of the website. All credit has to go to Gary for managing all of that. And we also have a very nice suite of 22 micro courses, free online courses that any coach can do from any sport. And then we are quite active on social media. And I was saying before that we were doing this because we wanted to support coaches. Now, we also knew that the youth sport landscape in 2016, and it's not really, I was going to say it's not got better, and in some cases it has got better, in others not so much, okay, wasn't particularly great, okay. We know that 81% of adolescents are not really active enough, and that gets even worse for girls, 84% of them. We know that if we don't do anything about this, that will lead to 500 million non-communicable diseases. So those are diseases that could be avoided, not because they're not genetic or anything like that, and could be avoided. And for the policymakers and the politicians, if we don't do anything about that, it's going to cost us 300 billion. Okay, so that's where we are at a global level. We've always said, let me skip over that. Okay, we've always said that the reason why children drop out of sport is sometimes because they're not competent enough, okay, or because they don't feel competent enough. But we wanted to understand really if that was a picture that really held true when you actually research this at a higher level. Back in 2022, we did a big study where we looked at over 5 million children across 27 countries and 18 sports in Europe. Okay, and what we found is that roughly most sports have a rate of dropout of 40 to 70% from the age of 8 to the age of 18. Okay, so imagine, I always say, if you were the president of Netflix, the CEO of Netflix, and you lost 70% of your customers, you probably would get sacked, okay? But in sport, we make an assumption that it is natural that children are going to drop out of sport. And yes, some of that will be natural, okay? But we wanted to understand which elements might not be natural, and perhaps that we can do something about it, okay? So a couple of years ago, we did another study to really understand why children drop out. And we created a newly developed questionnaire with 49 factors of potential factors for dropout, and we gave it to 1,500 young people across 7 European countries. And we found out some worrying things, okay? So the first one is that 50% of the dropout happens after 14 years of age. Okay, so that was a big thing. We also found out, and this is what I was saying before, that traditionally we think that dropout is always related to low competence. But we found out that 73% of those children that dropped out actually considered themselves sporty, yet they still dropped out. Okay, so even if you are good at sport, you're still at risk. Okay, more so, we even found that 40% of the sample that we collected actually dropped out from youth performance sport. So even if you're very good, you still drop out. Okay, so that was a bit worrying and a little bit flying in the face of traditional knowledge around dropout. So we have a problem, okay, and we need to make sure that we account for this problem. Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your computer. That's Gary's handy work, okay. So now we're going to give you a minute, okay, for you to tell us what we found out in 18 months of doing research, okay? You've got 60 seconds to, using the chat, give us as many reasons for dropout as you can think of. You know, when you think about why children drop out of sport, just go on the chat and type as many. Type one and hit there you go, not done. So keep going. As many as you can. Let me start the clock. Here we go. Okay, so listen, thank you so much for that. So much input there, and very quick as well. Clearly, you're working in the system. So all the things you've said there were part of the questionnaire that we gave to the young people, 49 items. Okay, let me give you the top 10. Okay, we're gonna start from 10 and we're gonna go up from there and see if the things that came on the top 10 relate to the things that you put in there. Okay, so at 10. Okay, not enough playing time. Okay, so in the top 10, not enough playing time. One that is preventable, something that we could do something about. Okay, number 9, high expectations from coaches. So again, something that perhaps we can do a little bit about. At number 8, at some point, doing sport became not worth the effort. Okay, what I have to put in, I didn't get enough out, really, basically. And number 7, I didn't feel that I was as good as my friends. Okay, so comparative low competency level. At number 6, I actually didn't think that I was good enough in general, not by comparison to my peers, but just a low sense of competence. At number 5, and this one breaks my heart, no one helped me stay. When I started thinking of dropping out, no one did anything to try and keep me in. Okay, that's really worrying. And in some of the countries that we surveyed, this was number 1 reason in a couple of them. Okay, so very sad. And number 4, I just stopped enjoying it at some point. Something happened that made me stop enjoying it. And we're getting to the top 3. Performance-related stress. So everyone in the environment made me feel stressed out about how well I should be doing. Okay. At top 2, perhaps a natural thing. I found other things to do as I got older. So I got into other things, into going out, into music, into other things. Okay. And at number 1, a surprise factor. Okay. I had to prioritize my studies. Okay. Children at some point have to make a decision between continuing doing sport or being able to keep up and cope with academic pressure. All right. So obviously, as I was saying, some of these things might be natural, like reason number 2, finding other things to do. Okay. Although we could do something about it. Okay. But some of the others are clearly the ball is on our court. Okay. So when you look at these reasons, and then you look at how highly they were scored, the interesting thing is that number 1, 2, and 3, they were significantly more important than the others, but none of them were actually rated extremely important. Okay, so they were higher than the others, but not extremely important. And all the others were scored in the somewhat important, which means that actually the dropping out is a combination of factors. It's not a single thing. All right. So what we need to do is try to attack as many of those factors as we can, because there's not going to be a magic bullet for anything. And we also found that for every child is a bit different. They all have their own different journey. So when you look at that number 5, no one helped me stay, we need to be mindful that we need to really make this an individualized approach. We're not going to fix it with just one thing. We have to make it a point to purposefully be mindful of the possibility of dropping out. All right, so some key things to consider before I hand over to Gary. As coaches, we should really listen to the voice of the children to see what they need from us. Okay, if our job is to make them come back to sport every day, what do they need from us? How do they want their sport? We need to make it fun. We need to make fun a goal for all our sessions. I hate it when a coach says to me in my club, "Oh, on Friday we're going to do a fun session because we're breaking up for the holidays." And I say, "So all the other sessions were horrible? We're only doing a fun session before we break up?" We have to really spend time prioritizing relationships and making sure that they feel like they belong and a sense of togetherness. We have to give every child a chance to learn and to experience success. When you look at this, none of this is new. Okay, I think what we're saying is We know that these things matter. We need to be purposeful about this. We tend to think that these things happen naturally, okay? But they don't. We have to purposefully set out to do these things. What about the clubs? Again, clubs have to have clear policies about what's their role in youth sport. What are they there for? Okay, that they're there to keep children coming back. So they need to develop policies and practices that are about safe sport and safe psychological climates. They need to create developmentally appropriate environments. They need to consider all the different types of reasons why young people drop out and try to set up their clubs in a way that mitigates against some of those. And perhaps, and Gary will get into this, children today, maybe they don't want to do sport the same way we did 30 years ago. So we might have to find new ways to present sport to them, new formats. And finally, the parents. Just to give you, again, I'm not going to steal Gary's thunder, but we are currently in the middle of another research project looking at why coaches stop dropping out. So why coaches stop coaching, why coaches drop out. Parents have come through as a big reason why coaches stop coaching, okay? So we need to really support the parents in helping them understand the best ways to work with both their children, support their children, and the coaches that work with them. Okay, so that was a quick whistle-stop tour. I think I'm now going to hand over to Gary for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Sergio. I think I've taken control, which is about the only thing I've taken control of in my life since having children. So I guess where we're at now is to discuss about, if we know that young people are dropping out of sport, how do we not only engage the next generation of participants and inspire them, but what are the considerations for them as potentially the next generation of coaches too? Now, just checking my buttons worked. Has the slide moved on? Is that it was meant to? Yeah, I've got a thumbs up from Sergio. Great. Now, there's no judgment here, right? But just put a yes in the chat if you're a part of these generations. So yes in the chat if you are a baby boomer. Okay, I won't call you golden oldies, but it doesn't appear that there's any of them on this call so far. Any Generation X, peace sign. Any Gen X in the audience? Yeah, Graham, Sergio, Shane, John. Okay, right. I'm getting outnumbered here, so there's definitely no judgment on these. Any millennials? I'm one of those. I'm one of the cool kids. Any millennials on the call? Emma's raising her hand. Danelle, Ben, Sophie. Yeah, we're outnumbering the Gen X's. Any Gen Zers? Z or Z? Depends where you're from. None? Okay, few. Olivia, Zaid, Lauren. Fantastic. Now, I'm assuming there's no teenagers on the call. Any alphas? Or any babies, any newborn babies on the call? No, their priorities are different. They're awake at this time of night, but for the wrong reasons. But I guess where we're at with these generations is to the left-hand side of this, they're our current coaches. And to the right-hand side, they're either our current youth sport participants or even somewhere down the line, they're our future coaches. So we know that chances are our future sport coaches have been sport participants. So we need to protect these guys. So what we know about these younger generations so far? Well, let's not start with what I think. Take the next 30 seconds in the chat to just type what you think are the typical characteristics of a Generation Alpha. Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So born from 1997 onwards. So quickly in the chat, 30 seconds, typical characteristics of those. Again, there's no judgment here from me. Not yet, anyway. Great. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. 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 Last 10 seconds. By the way, this is the first time I've run this task where there has been kind of a majority kind of positive take on these generations. There's a lot of judgment that goes on these generations that I think is unfair. So that's really, really exciting to see. What we know from the research is similar to what you're saying in the chat, right? So they've been influenced by digital tech all of their lives. They're tech savvy, they're emotionally intelligent, amazingly tolerant and understanding of diversity, but they do typically have shorter attention spans, lower self-confidence, and often described as having a sense of entitlement. But meeting the needs of individuals within these groups can be really challenging for coaches and for educators because of the gaps in attitudinal differences. And we know coaches are at risk of dropping out too because of lack of support, and we don't want that to meet the future coaching workforce. So we need to identify, recruit, motivate, and encourage a new generation of coaches to positively impact the future of sport participation. I'll just skip past this, but one of the sentences that I think is really important to outline is, we often hear these days that kids aren't tough enough, but then ask the question, what did your parents say about your generation? And what did their parents say about them? And what did play, sport, school, and home life look for each of these generations? I would guess often significantly different. So, for example, the baby boomers, some of their parents went to war, right? So their experience of life is very different to perhaps those that younger people that are living today with different circumstances. So it might not be fair to expect the same. So, some future considerations. If we know they're influenced by digital technology, we need to leverage mobile devices as curriculum catalysts. If we know they've got short attention spans, make sure we give clear, concise instructions, feedback, tasks in terms of the players we work with. Low self-confidence, plenty of opportunities for success. If we know they understand and celebrate diversity, we celebrate difference, not uniformity in our teams. And if we know there's a risk of dropout, we need to make it fun, reduce performance-related pressures, and prioritize their voice in line with what Sergio was saying. So I'm just going to quickly whiz through our 10 golden principles. You can find out more about these at icoachkids.org and dive deeper into them. But based on these ideas around, we know that dropout exists, we know that we need to create safe and positive environments for young people in sport. These are our 10 principles that we would always point to. So, number 1 would be to be child-centered. Number 2 is being holistic. Number 3 is being inclusive. Number 4 is making it fun and safe. Number 5 is prioritizing the love for sport over learning sport. Number 6 is focusing on foundational skills, so movement skills and play skills. Number 7 is engaging parents positively. I'll move back onto parents in a little while. Number 8 is planning progressive programs, so planning for working with children over the long term, not just session by session. Number 9 is about using different methods to enhance learning. So there's no right or wrong way, but a blend of different coaching methods is important. And finally, competition doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? If we use it in a developmental way, it can make really motivational and positive experiences for children and young people. So I would always encourage you as you go away today to consider which of these principles are you, your club, and your organization great at, and where do you have room to improve. So just to close, we also have to consider about the coaches too. So as Sergio has said, we've done a little bit of research in the last 12 months about dropout in coaches, and typical reasons for dropping out include burnout and stress, financial pressure, increasing coach burden, and life outside of coaching. And the biggest reason really was around parents. So parents can cause quite a lot of that stress. So we need to appreciate as organizations the nature of the volunteer workforce. We need to understand that they're experiencing these pressures, and actually that they're giving a lot away of their free time to contribute to inspiring the next generation of young people to be physically active. So implications for developing coaches then should include mobile-friendly resources that leverage social media to generate curiosity for the next generation. If we know they've got short attention spans, and they don't only have short attention spans, they often have limited time, our coaches. So short-form content that can get them to good principles fast. If they've got low self-confidence, let's gamify the learning offering to make them feel a level of success, giving badges and rewards. And if we know that diversity is still important for these generations, then learners should see themselves and within the content, no matter what gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity that they are, they should see themselves in coaching. And also we need to create blended approaches that afford these people to fit their coach development within their busy lives. We can talk another time about building the strategy, but in short, it's about bringing those two generations together, the older and younger generations. It's being called currently in Europe intergenerational fairness is the term that I've heard. It probably is the same elsewhere, but bridging digital competency gaps between these generations to make a more cohesive youth sport experience. So I'm just going to hand back over to Sergio to just kind of go through our key messages and close our part. I hope my 3 minutes over haven't done too much damage, but thank you for listening, and over to you, Serge.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so just to kind of bring it home a little bit, some key messages really, as I was saying, if we want to contribute to mitigating sport dropout, we need to be purposeful. We can't leave it to chance. We have a lot of information about why it happens. So let's do something about it that is planned and purposeful, and let's really take the views of the children and young people into account. I think a lot of the times we think that coaching is something that we do to children and young people, and it's something that we do with them. Okay, and we need to really see what works for them. And then finally, really, we understand that that coaches are really pressed. They're pressed for time, they're pressed for finances, so we have to do whatever we can to really make coaches' lives easier and help them enjoy their coaching and help them make the most of their coaching. So things like what you're doing today, things like hopefully the resources that we are creating at this iCoach Kids, that's what we need to really give coaches. You have to stop demonizing coaches and really support them. They do an amazing job for children and young people, and we have to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. So much that I'm sure resonates with people working in New Zealand communities. And the chat has been incredibly rich in terms of people making connections and asking questions and their reckons and surprises. Just a couple of questions from me as we move on to the next part of our seminar. In New Zealand, we use the word whakapapa, which sort of is probably poorly translated as sort of an intergenerational things that get passed on from one generation to another generation. I'm really interested if you've got any research or reckons around the impact that how you were coached affects the way that you coach and the extent to which coaches reflecting on their coaching whakapapa, if you like, may be like a powerful tool. The second one, because you can answer both these at once, the second thing I'm interested in is really about those competition structures. It seems to me that sometimes the coaches are very driven by external things like the structure of a competition or qualifying for the next round or getting through grading. And I just wondered if you had any suggestions about what we could be thinking about in that space.
So I'm going to let Gary take the first question about the passing it on, okay? And I'm going to take the second one because we've done some recent work on this, on the competition. Gary, I'm just going to pass you the hot potato.
Yeah, I don't feel like you've thrown me under the bus. I felt you've drove the bus yourself. But yeah, I guess I've often had this sense that people often get into coaching either because they've had a really negative experience of coaching growing up and they want to put it right, or they've had an overwhelmingly inspiring experience and they're like, yeah, I want to pay it forward too. But regardless of that, we need to create safe spaces for people to join coaching and make mistakes, but in a supportive environment where that wisdom can be shared and reflected on appropriately. Because I started coaching like 20 years ago, right? And the 15-year-old version of me, I hate to see now. I would never do the things that I did in front of a group of kids, but I made those mistakes in a supportive environment. And that's what becomes really important. So if we can provide the appropriate, not only education, but ongoing development opportunities, we take people, no matter what their inspiration is, into coaching and allow them to make the appropriate mistakes and the appropriate steps forward, that the future version of themselves keeps making sport a better place. And now I'm going to pass that bus back to Sergio for the second question.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so we have done over the last year or so, and this really started with a project that we did with the Special Olympics. Special Olympics wanted to explore how they could create better competitions for their children in, and this is a global organization, okay? So we started exploring how competition varies from country to country or from different sports, what people are doing to, as we say in point number 10 of the pledge, to make competition developmental. Because there's nothing wrong with competition as long as we present it and manage it in the right way, okay? And as long as it serves a purpose rather than being an end in itself. I think that's the main thing. Because what happens is, in our experience, is that, as you were saying, Gregor, like, coaches are victims of the structures that they are in. So if the structures of the competitions are emphasizing winning and scores and promotion and relegation and things like that, they get trapped in this, okay? So exploring how we can make competition more developmental, from something as simple as adapting the equipment and the size of the teams and the playing surface and everything to the children, so they can enjoy competition more. Making competition, reducing the numbers in teams, so more children have more chances to touch the ball, to be involved, to be part of it. For example, in Belgium, okay, up to, and this is going to sound a bit, but up to 7 years of age, they play football 2v2. Okay, so every child 2v2, right? They in a club you might have 20 children in one team, okay, but when they bring them together into festivals, they don't do leagues, okay, because there's no need to run a league for under sevens, okay. They bring them into festivals and they play them 2v2, and they play 25 games of 2v2 in a couple of hours, and every child goes home having scored 25 goals, okay. And so that's the one way that they've managed to do that. So it's just being creative about what is the purpose of competition, and then build your competition around the purpose rather than the other way around. And understanding that for some children, they just don't want to compete in the traditional way. Okay, it's something that we've inherited, the competition system. So that's just an example, really. But there are a million ways to be creative with your competition.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much to both of you. Such a insightful presentation and really, really great. There will be a time for far better questions than the ones I've asked at the end. But I'm now going to pass over to Dr. Will Roberts. His presentation's slightly different than the one we advertised. But we are really looking forward to. Are you able to take over? Are you able to take over, Will? You've taken control. Amazing. He's even moving his slides. Will is amazing. Will is from the School of Sport and Human Movement and Division of Health at the University of Waikato. And he is going to speak to us about reimagining play, child-first approaches to coaching. So we'll pass over to you, Will, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end, but keep using the chat, people. It's been amazing.
Thanks very much, Gregor. Yeah, kia ora, ko Will Roberts aho. I'm head of school at Sport of Human Movement. I really great to see friends Sergio and Gary on the call. Inspired by their work a lot, and I think you'll see some synergies, and I think we see the world of coaching and developing young people in very similar ways. So hopefully I'll sort of be able to bridge on to some of what they've said. Yeah, look, I'm going to focus very much on the role of play in trying to respond to a lot of the really important things that Sergio and Gary have both said. Not on purpose. We didn't get together and design it in this way, but a lot of our work, as Gregor said, I'm at University of Waikato, but colleagues at University of Gloucestershire and I have been doing a lot of work around play and how we support coaches in order to give young people better experiences of sport. And play can be a pretty gnarly word. So I'm just going to sort of try and respond to some of those ideas, and hopefully you'll take something from this. Do feel free to put things in the chat at any point. I'm very happy to sort of try and respond to things as they pop up. Not a lover of diktats and slides, so we'll see how we go. One of the questions that we might think is why we need a child-first approach. So, as you've already heard, there's some persistent youth physical inactivity issues, and we know that coaching is often adult-led, it's often technique-focused, it's often outcome-driven, can be a response to formal education, or, as we've just discussed, a response to the way we were coached. I love sport, it worked for me, why not do it like this, is something that quite often pervades this space. And we know that, and I'll use this word lightly and not forcefully, but we know that coaching can be kind of steeped in myths, or certainly steeped in things that should be challenged and questioned and pushed back on. You know, we need the basics before we can do complex things, or we must have 10,000 hours of practice in order to get better. There are some things that we can actually challenge, or certainly think about the way that we respond to some of those ideas. And a lot of the work that I'll sort of frame this around today, yes, play, but this notion of physical literacy, which I know is really important globally. It's a contested term for sure, but I'm sort of seeing this as our one of the pledges for I Coach Kids was holistic, and we need to think about young people's development beyond the physical, right? And so physical literacy really thinks about some of the ideas of our relationship with movement and physical activity throughout life. So yeah, our confidence, our motivation, our understanding, and what I'm going to do is sort of position play as a response to, or a way that we might really try and accelerate and nurture physical literacy for young people. So I'm just going to ask you to, hopefully this works, I'm just going to ask you to look at this image. And think about the last time that you saw kids completely absorbed in movement. What was happening, what was going on. So if you put that in the chat box, I haven't got a neat 60-second countdown timer, I'm afraid, but if you just spend sort of 30 seconds, think about the last time you saw kids completely absorbed in movement, what was going on. Please put that in the chat. Swimming at the Mount. Yeah. Yeah, making your own rules. Joe, backyard play. Yeah, Gary, you and I are in a similar time of our lives, I think, watching young people run around, making your own fun, climbing trees at the park. Yeah, 3-year-old boy. When we think about, and please keep putting these in the chat box. I'll try and make up a bit of time, and I'll keep going. We know that kids are absorbed when they make their own rules. They're able to really adapt to the environment that they find themselves in. Backyard play, being creative and imaginative. Very often, young people will develop movement competencies by playing, right? And when adults get out of the way. And a lot of what the work that I know Sergio and Gary are doing, we're doing with a project that I will present to you today, is often trying to redress some of that over inserted adult space, right? Where coaches feel that they need to control, manage. We need to ensure that young people are being active and getting opportunities. And so we've stepped in, and actually we know that kids can be most absorbed in movement when they own it and they run it and they control it. And it's writ large in the UN Rights of the Child to Play, actually. So one of the articles very much talks about children's right to play. It's not really an optional. It's not an add-on or a nice to have. It's genuinely a right. Okay, and that can be quite scary. But what that means is us understanding and thinking about how we ensure everyone gets a go, and how we I'm minded of one of my young children's experience of a five-a-side football match, because the rules said that five-a-side is really important, and there were 7 kids there. And actually, if you just expand the pitch a bit and get all 7 playing, we've got access and a right to play. But we're often contesting against these sorts of these kind of really resilient and steeped myths, right? It's really important for kids to learn how to be subs and to take their turn, and to, you know, and actually I think we can challenge some of those ideas, and we very much know that play is an important and emergent thing. It's not something that's often structured. Whereas what we actually tend to see is lots of lines and lots of people taking turns and rigorous skill development, because that's important for the game that you're about to play or you might play when you're an adult. And we're in a real rush to sort of treat young people as many adults. And the research really points to this notion that in our coaching infrastructures and our systems, we're very much build things with an end in mind. I know what you'll need when you're 21, and therefore we must start you on that path now, versus what might play look like for the right age and stage. And it's really interesting. In 1991, Kaplan predicted that in the year 2000, kids will be subjected to greater pressures towards beginning academic work early, be asked to submit more and more to adult-led activities, doubtful that television time will be reduced. The child thus may have less opportunity to play and less opportunity to direct his or own play. In 1991, predicting that the sort of rise of the TV and academic pressures by the year 2000 would mean that children would have less time to play. This was prescient, even though the emergence of smartphones, PCs, online games was probably not on Kaplan's radar at the time, or certainly would have only been in the early throes of it. And we see a lot of what Gary and Sergio have talked about in terms of the pressures and the reasons for dropout are writ large. Like, we've known this for 30, 40, 50 years. But from a systems perspective, haven't particularly responded all that well to some of those pressures. And it's really easy to say technology is taking our kids' time away, but it's more exciting. It's better designed. It's more accessible. It's easy to do. It's often very individual. I can pick a game up and start it at the level that I want to. I can set myself from beginner right through to world class, and I can access it. And we know that game designers actually are exceptionally good at attracting young people's attention. And I think that therefore the kind of demand on us in the coaching space is for us to really think about how we respond to that. How might we do our practice and our game design a little bit better? And I'll talk to that in a moment. And yeah, look, some statistics to sort of build on and think about building on Gary's work earlier. We know that physical inactivity is increasing. We know that physical activity is underpinned by that holistic development. And we sort of thought that, and this is the project I'll show to you in a moment, we thought that practitioner education might be a real vehicle to try and tackle some of the things that we know are happening in terms of young people's time and energy and attention away from play, to try and drive it back towards play. So there's a number of bits of work, and look, I'm happy to share any of these with colleagues at Sport NZ to redistribute, but there are a number of pieces of work globally going on to try and reimagine play and think about play differently. Gary and I were on a board for Children's Coaching Collaborative that has sort of instigated child first coaching through a UK campaign, Play Their Way. A number of organisations signing up to thinking differently about the UN right of the child and how we put children first. A lot of my work and some of the research there is really about how we return to play and reimagine play. And right from grassroots through to work I do at the moment in terms of coach development with professional football clubs and the Premier League. We've also looked at the return to play and reimagining play in academy settings like Man United. So lots of this work is often sort of marginalized as, oh, that's great for grassroots, or it's great for, actually it's just great for young people in terms of irrespective of their skill level. And we know that play is a way that we learn about rules, and we learn about how to socialize, we learn about how to engage with movement really effectively, facilitates creativity. And so there's some real work globally and some really nice stuff also in New Zealand, thinking about how we might reimagine play and support coaches to insert that into their practice and what that might look like. So I'm going to talk to you about the Boing project, which was a funded project in the UK that looked at trying to do some of this. So where we, and this is, you know, there's much more nuance to this. This feels like a black and white conversation, and I really don't mean it to be. It's very nuanced, but we kind of think about traditional ideas as skill before experience, you know, love the sport, learn the sport before love the sport. So the opposite of what we're really trying to get to. We think about compliance, we think about consistent and uniform delivery, we think about coaches quite often in control. And there's a big body of work both from physical education and coaching that talks more broadly about different ways to approach coaching. But we know actually that a child-first approach talks very much around co-design, shared ownership, exploration, experiences before skill. And whilst that might feel a little bit chaotic, what we did was quite a bit of research around how we might embed that in practice. So my work very much looks at practice design and how we can bring play about through coaching. The project we did with Boing looked at some principles that you tend to see in young people when you get some of this right. And we know that it can be captivating, and think about the chat. You know, when kids are really engaged, what does it look like? It's fun, it's engaging, it's meaningful, but challenging. Play is not reduce or get rid of competition. It needs to be appropriate difficulty, it needs to be high stretch, high support. We know it's constant, so there's very little inactivity. Always exploring, always moving, always trying to solve problems. We think collaboration is key. So in the Boing project, we built 120 games for coaches to use as a response to some things we'd seen and observed in coaching practice. But we know it's collaborative, co-creation with children, but also children to children, not always forcing them to compete against each other, but often to further and better themselves. Quite often creative. Good movers make good decisions. Good decision makers move well. And so we're really interested in creativity and not just repetitiveness, and celebrating and recognizing all success was part of the Boing project. Sorry, just making sure that my next slide works. So what we did was developed the Boing project was a 90-minute workshop. This actually has got a link in it to the website, so I'll share that with, as I say, with colleagues. It won't click through on this particular slide deck, but we created 120 games as a response to watching our students in the UK constantly spend time designing practices and spend little or no time actually coaching and being around young people, building relationships and helping them move. So we wanted to shortcut the practice design bit. So colleague and I, Danny Newcomb and I, designed a bunch of games to try and really respond to that, to help our students spend more time actually working with coaches. And you'll get the link to this, but there are a bunch of games there designed around those 6 C's to try and support coaches to really impact on play and physical literacy for young people. We've done a number of PhD projects around this, looking at the impact of that work and how it kind of impacts on teachers, parents, and others. And really, that's what I'm going to share with you now, just for this last little bit, is a bit of the evidence and some things that perhaps are things for us to think of, both in the sector and as coaches and as volunteers, really thinking about how the end user, young people, experience a different approach to coaching, but actually some of the challenges of educating and supporting coaches. So I know a number of you said you're coach developers, you're coaches yourselves, you're volunteers. So thinking about that sector is important. So what we did, and I say we because my colleague Kirsten Wing, who did her PhD on this, Danny and I developed Boing. Kirsten was one of my PhD students that looked at this work. But we really designed, as I said, we took those games, we designed a 90-minute workshop, and then we delivered that workshop. We know they can be effective, and our kind of, not our hypothesis, but our kind of test or challenge point was really understanding how effective workshops can be to support coaches. So that's what I'll talk to you about now. We trained 926 coaches to use Boing and to use the different games as a kind of approach to physical literacy. Did a pre-workshop questionnaire, 90-minute interactive online workshop, and this was around COVID, so we had to move to online. Post-workshop questionnaire, and then a 6-month follow-up questionnaire. And you can see that as with all things research, the kind of engagement drops off. So those numbers are not on purpose. They're just the folks that we could actually chase up. So when I show you some of the data in a moment, just be mindful that this is not everyone completing, but it's it's a coalition of the willing, I guess. So you'll get certain responses in that data. And we saw this, and I think this is really interesting for the sector. We asked them about their knowledge, attitude and confidence towards play and physical literacy, pre, post and then follow-up, just on a Likert scale. And knowledge, confidence and attitude is, as you see, 2.13 and 2.4 pre any sort of workshop. And then we see knowledge, attitude and confidence rise significantly, almost to a kind of maximum, essentially saying, yeah, I feel really comfortable. I can use those materials. I can deliver play. I can deliver physical literacy. I feel like I can really impact on young people. And there's that sort of sense and feeling, right? And this is part of our challenge in how we support shifts in our coaching pedagogy. Our access is quite often volunteers, coaches, and supporting them. But then in terms of the 6-month follow-up, we see that drop, not massively, but significantly. And I think this is one of the things that I'll reflect on at the end of the slide, is just how do we actually support coaches in an ongoing way? Yeah, and it's I won't spoil the surprise, but there's some interesting things I think we need to start to consider. We also then looked at some interviews working with coaches and young people in particular. And we noticed that in terms of practitioners and coaches, organizational structure, the experiences that they've had before are important. Knowing that we need to intervene for young people to develop, understanding play as an underpinning concept was really important to drive practice. And often coaches are really open to these ideas. Of course, child first, of course, play. Why wouldn't I do those things? But some of the barriers to use it: reduced contact time, organizational policy, expectations of what coaching looks like, parental expectations of what coaching should look like. Highly structured, my kid's going to be an All Black, therefore you need to coach in this way, otherwise they'll never get there. So some of those things are really persistent challenges. Some of the facilitators to use, alignment when it works in a curricular way. So you might have a particular school, for example, who has a particular approach to play and so on, so that those things can quite often work quite well. In terms of children, what we heard from them and when we did interviews, shared interactions are really important. Children are accessing play in both in-person and digital ways. And we need to start to bridge that, I think, as a sector. How do we engage people in the digital and then hook them into live work? And there's some important work going on in that space, certainly in the Waikato at the moment. Lived experience is really important. The environment young people find themselves in is really important. And actually storytelling and imagery for young people is important in terms of their hook to play. So this is less about drills and sport and more about creativity and adaptation to the environment, and coaches being able to tell neat stories around what play might look like. And it just takes us back really to that sort of really playful approach. And some of our really key outcomes in this research that are important is that shared engagement across the digital and physical is really essential for kids to feel like they're in play. Last couple of slides from me. But why coaches and healthcare professionals and others have to really start to reframe this, I think, is we're seeing people in their adult life and elderly life really impacted by their lack of engagement in play and physical activity in their younger years. So one of our practitioners working in healthcare, play really needs investment. Training is always short term. We need to think about young people in the future, their future as adults. One of my oldest at the moment is 89, still dealing with issues from their childhood in terms of their nutrition, their physical activity, their movement. If you just think we'd have had captured it when they were 4, 5 or 6, there's a whole lifetime they could have spent and really they're talking about could have spent moving in a different way, engaging with physical activity. And so we know if we can get coaching at the sort of around the tamariki space really right into rangatahi, then actually we will really impact on movement throughout the life. And going back to that first slide, physical literacy really is a lifelong engagement in movement. So we need to consider those things. We also did some work as part of this as engaging with young people at the end. So I talked there earlier about an unfinished stories approach, where we actually got children to draw and think about. So it's hard to interview kids, but we were able to spend a lot of time thinking creatively about how we evidenced young people's experience of this shift in coaching. So we worked with some of the coaches that had been through the training program to then access the young people that they were working with to understand the impact of that education on the way that young people engage with play. And largely what we evidenced was it really didn't matter what they were doing. Kids were less focused around, am I doing a particular code like netball or football or rugby? And more about, could we do this together? Could I play with my friends? Could I have those really important experiences around movement? And this came through whether it was digital or it was physical. And actually, when we asked kids about play, they often talked about the digital spaces they were in, not the movement spaces that they were in. And that's, I think, a challenge for us to really think about how we better design coaching practice so that it is engaging rather than just that blame of, oh yeah, no, they've not got the same attention anymore, or young people don't want to do these things anymore. In my day, it looked like this. Actually, I think we need to just really think about different practice design in the coaching space. So some of our key messages from this research, and it'll be pleasing, I think, to some of you that engage in or put on workshops. We know they work, but we need a lot of work around the long-term support. So what happens beyond workshop training for coaches is really important around mentoring, online spaces, access to further development and so on, and communities of practice, right? How might we support each other? Organizations quite often are different, but they reported the same resource is really useful. So we don't always, I think, have to have nuanced and different resources. I think this is important in a space like New Zealand, where there are fewer people just as a population, and maybe we can actually get together as codes or different schools and think about how we develop resources together. Children's view of play has got to be accommodated, right? And so there's a big push to respond to the children's right to play by actually giving them voice. What do they want to do? What does play look like for them? How can we really support young people in their development? So some takeaways, I think, and then questions if you've got any. We can shift, and we saw through this research that we can shift coaches' perceptions of play and physical literacy, but ongoing support is really important. And for young people, they have a really unique view to play, but it's their right to play. And we know that problem-based learning and movement can emerge through the right coaching environments. And so really trying to shift the dial away from I have to teach young people how to move and actually give them environments where movement and problem solving are important. And aware of time. Any questions? I'm happy to take them, Gregor. We've got access to the research that we've done through that QR code. If anyone wants to have a look at it or follow up with a question, I'm really happy to respond.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Will. I guess I've just got one reflection, really. I think that often we, even at Sport New Zealand, think about play and sport as separate ways of people being physically active. And, just the simple message that has come through your presentation is we don't need to think them as separate. The power is when those go together. And it made me reflect on a moment, actually, in my previous life when I was the principal of Wellington College. We had about more than 30 football teams, the vast majority of which were self-selected social teams. And we used to always put their scores up in assembly. And one of the kids said to me, "Sir, why do you do that? That's not why we play. We don't play. We don't want to be told we lost 13-0. We actually had fun. It was a great, and yet you're putting it up as if it was a failure." And that was a real reflection about how for me about how the celebration needs to reflect the goals. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that. Are there any questions for Will or for or for our or for Sergio and Gary that we can take in this last few minutes? Feel free to use the chat if you want. I mean, there's been some amazing conversations in the chat. Otherwise, I think Justin's sitting here, desperate to ask a question. I've been telling him to let other people do it, but it's Sergio. You've got a question.
I have a follow-up in the sense of there was a couple of things that we said, and I've seen the Bond program in action is fantastic. So well done to Will and his colleagues. It's amazing, really. Please, people, go and have a look because it's great. But one of the things that we've done in the last 3 years, we created a new project called I Coach Girls, and what we did, we created a network of girls play centers around Europe, 50 centers across 12, 13 countries. And really what we did is we targeted girls that were inactive. And then back to the idea of voice, we trained nearly 400 female coaches across Europe to work through what the girls wanted to do. Okay, there was no curriculum for the play centers. The curriculum was built with the girls, and it's been super successful. I think we got something like, I'm saying this off the top of my head, but 85% of the girls said they had the intention to remain active after the play center, and these were girls that were previously inactive. Okay? So the idea of voice is super important at every level.
Thank you. Got about 2 minutes before we hand over to Andy. Is there any other questions that people would like to ask, or comments, reflections people would like to make? Oh, good. Justin is going to jump in.
Yeah. Thanks so much, team, for your presentations. Really interesting and I think pertinent to some of the thoughts that we're having at the moment here at Sport New Zealand. We'll hear more from Andy in a minute about that. But some of your reflections were really focused on implications for coaches, for clubs, for parents. Will, you also talked about implications for young people. A couple of times things were referred to in terms of not taking on board, or that we previously might not have taken on a systems perspective. And there's many people on this call from Sport New Zealand, from national sporting organisations. I'm wondering if you had, between the three of you, some reflections of the key first things that people in governing bodies or these policy bodies like we're in at Sport New Zealand should be thinking about to support those things further downstream.
Happy to go second, Sergio. I know you've got some thoughts about systems change.
Yeah, I'll have a quick go, really. But going back to we're doing some research at the moment on coach dropout, as I was saying before. And as part of this, we've done a survey with 1,000 coaches. We've done focus groups with a few coaches, and we've done some focus groups with the governing bodies. Okay, the federations and even the home country sport councils. Okay, and what's really apparent is that there's a little bit of a disconnect between the policymakers and the people on the ground. And when we talk to the coaches, all they said is, we just don't feel like anyone cares about us. Okay? So for me, the message when you take that into youth sport is, I think a lot of the times the people at the top might not be very well connected to what's happening on the ground, and sometimes we make a lot of assumptions, and we don't consult with. We make decisions for people without people a lot of the times, and I think that's something where that I see that happens quite often, and that's maybe one idea to consult more with the people that we're trying to support.
Yeah, look, I'd agree wholeheartedly with that. I think it's we've got this view of coaching because we've got access to see what coaching looks like at an elite or a global level, where it's well funded and it's well resourced and there's lots of people. And I think there's often an assumption that it's going to be glamorous, and actually the sort of Tuesday lonely on your own, you've organized the kit, you've had to ring around and get people there, you've had to possibly transport kit from one place to another. It's a really challenging space, right? The reality of coaching, having done that from grassroots through to sort of academy settings, the reality of coaching is it's quite challenging and quite complex, and there's lots of well-intended people coaching, right? It's often volunteers, people stepping into spaces to make sure kids sport actually happens. And I think it's really trying to work out how we best support, and the sort of the compliance piece around some workshops and getting trained and getting some skills is useful, but actually the ongoing really informal, how did you find coaching, what are you doing on the ground, how can we support you to think differently, or to support your approach to coaching, that is often missing and doesn't make its way from policy always to practice on the ground. And that's the piece of work I think is missing. And if I think about the academic space, it's easy for us, like I think the three of us are practitioners, not just academics, which changes the scope a little bit. But you often get academics critiquing policy and practice, you get policy saying this is how practice should be done, and then there's sort of people on the ground kind of going, oh, I just want some help actually. So how we do that, I think, requires systems thinking, and by that I mean all of us actually coming together and to some extent throwing away the agendas that we've all got our own things to do, whether it's us produce research or policy makers. I'm thinking about UK, not colleagues in New Zealand, but maybe have KPIs to hit. Like, how do we start afresh and think about the young people and the coaches as a start point would be useful, I think.
Gary, did you want to quickly say something before we hand over to Andy?
Yeah, just super quick. I guess it becomes really easy at different points along the chain, right, to point fingers up and down. But I guess fundamentally we've got to remember that there's lots of good people doing great work out there. Sometimes it becomes unseen or unheard. And I think we often miss opportunities to really celebrate and elevate the stories of the people doing great work. And earlier I spoke to the point of kind of people being able to see themselves in coaching. Now, if we start to elevate the stories of different people from different backgrounds in different areas, different ethnicities, different genders, doing the great work that they do, that level of kind of inspiration and legacy can be really powerful for organizations. So yeah, like sometimes the finger pointing is the right thing to do, but there is also a real precedent for celebrating and elevating the great work that lots of people are doing.
Thank you. Really, really excellent way to end that segment. Thank you so much to all three of you for your contributions and all the thought and research that has gone into that. I'm going to pass over to Andy Rogers. Andy Rogers is Sport New Zealand's Sport Development Lead with a focus on coaching. And so I'm going to pass over to Andy to wrap this up. And I'm hoping that you guys can all stay on for an extra 5 minutes to make up for my poor chairing and desire to talk in this session so that we can give Andy his 5 minutes. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Gregor. I appreciate time's running away on us, so I'll keep it as brief as possible. Firstly, can I just acknowledge the presenters today for the wonderful job they did. Just so many key messages in there to take away and ponder on. I guess I want to paint a picture that's a little bit more rosy in New Zealand. 9 or 10 years ago, we asked our system to respond. We had similar problems that have been presented today. And we asked our system to respond through, back then, a concept called balance is better. And I think genuinely 9 years on, we've got a world-class approach in this country to youth sport that is just aligned so beautifully with the messages that have come through today. yes, we've got a long way to go, and I acknowledge that many of our partners are on board today listening to this call. But I just want to acknowledge the absolute pockets of brilliance that are happening across the country that are aligned to, we talk about a policy called Balance is Better, which fundamentally is about starting with the participants' motivations and aspirations in mind as we develop a system. Yes, coaches are important, but equally so is the competitions and the offerings that are wrapped around those. And that's why we're working really hard with our partners to identify what are you doing to support and help coaches become new age coaches, but equally, how are you wrapping around the support with ideal competitions and support for young people, and equally the supporters of youth sport. Look, just to signpost a couple of things for our listeners. When we do talk about policy, we're in the midst of starting and refreshing a new coaching strategy, which will very much take on a lot of these concepts around providing the blueprint for our partners to bring coaching and keep coaching moving forward. To align with some of the messages we've heard today and respond to young people. But equally, if you like what you heard today, we're so excited next year to be hosting the Global Coaches Conference. First time in New Zealand to host something of this significance. One of the drivers that we're going to wrap around the conference is a global youth sports symposium. And you'll see the faces that you saw today, hopefully in that symposium, along with other global experts supporting our New Zealand network. So the conference is for coaches of all levels. It's for system leaders. It's for CEOs. We want to bring together the biggest group that we ever have had at this conference in the history of it. So get your planning in. There'll be more information over the coming months. But really looking forward to bringing the New Zealand system together along with, several global experts. So I'll hand back, Gregor. Thank you very much, team.
And thank you, Andy, and your team for your continued leadership in this really important space. Thank you again for your time. I need to acknowledge our colleagues at Victoria University at Te Hau Kori who have partnered with Sport New Zealand to deliver this and other workshops, seminars that we offer both online and in person. So thanks to the team up at Te Herenga Waka Victoria University for their ongoing support over these. Let's close our time together with the same karakia that we opened with. Tu taua mai I runga, tu taua mai I raro, tu taua mai I roto, tu taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, kia tau ai te mauri ora, tū tūra whakamaua, kia taina, haumie ue, tai kie. Thanks, team. Have a great day.